Let me set the scene. I live in Serenity Estates. The name is a cruel joke. It's a nice, quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind with perfectly manicured lawns and beige houses that all look vaguely related. And presiding over this kingdom of conformity is the Serenity Estates HOA, led by its president, a man named Chadwick Chad Pembroke. Now, Chad isn't your classic Karen. He's more of a HOA Bro. He wears polo shirts so tight you can read the brand of his undershirt, and his golf clap has the power to make grown men weep. He's a man who found his kingdom in the HOA bylaws, and he rules with an iron fist tucked inside a leather golf glove. The conflict began not with a bang, but with a whimsical 12-inch tall ceramic gnome. His name was Barnaby. My daughter, Lily, who was 7 at the time, won him at a school fair. She placed him proudly by our front porch, holding a little mushroom. He was harmless. He was joyful. He was apparently public enemy number 1. The first letter arrived on thick, expensive stationery. From the desk of the Serenity Estates HOA Compliance Committee. Subject: Unapproved lawn protrusion, Code 42B. Dear homeowner, it has come to our attention that your property is in violation of Community Aesthetic Standard 42B. No statuary, figurines, or other non-floral lawn ornaments shall be placed on any lot without prior written approval from the Architectural Review Board. The unauthorized gnome entity must be removed within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $50, accruing daily. I laughed. I actually laughed. I called the HOA office, trying to be the reasonable adult. Hi, yes, this is about the gnome. It's my daughter's. It's just a little. The woman on the phone cut me off. The committee has determined it disrupts the visual harmony of the cul-de-sac. The deadline is clear. Visual harmony. From the street where 3 houses have identical plastic flamingos that were pre-approved. I showed the letter to Lily. Her bottom lip trembled. Is Barnaby in trouble? She asked. That's when I should have known this wasn't about a gnome. This was about power. I moved Barnaby. Not to appease Chad, but to spare my daughter's feelings. I put him in our fenced-in backyard, where he could happily guard a petunia patch away from the prying eyes of the HOA bro. I thought that was the end of it. I was so wrong. 2 weeks later, another letter. Subject: Unapproved gardening and topography alteration, Code 17C. Aerial drone surveillance has identified an unapproved dam structure on your property, specifically at the terminus of the seasonal creek in your backyard. Ah, the dam. Let me explain. My backyard slopes down to a small, sleepy creek that only really flows after a heavy rain. When Lily was younger, we'd stack a few smooth rocks and some mud to make a little pool for her toy boats. It was about 6 inches high. It was a father-daughter project, not the Hoover Dam. We called it Lily's Levee. The letter continued, dripping with bureaucratic venom. This unpermitted alteration to natural water flow constitutes a significant violation. You are ordered to dismantle the structure immediately and restore the land to its original, HOA-approved grade.
Fine. $250. Drone surveillance.
They were flying a drone over my backyard to look for violations. The pettiness was awe-inspiring. I went to the next HOA meeting, ready to reason. The meeting was held in the clubhouse that smelled faintly of chlorine and regret. Chad sat at the head of the table, a gavel next to his Starbucks cup. Chad, I said, trying to keep my voice even. The dam is just a few rocks. It's for my daughter. It doesn't hurt anything. Chad smiled a thin, humorless smile. The bylaws are clear, neighbor. We can't have residents arbitrarily changing the landscape. It sets a precedent. What if everyone decided to build their own little water features? He said water features like it was a biohazard. I'm not changing the watershed of the entire county, Chad. It's a pile of rocks. Rules are rules, he chirped, tapping his gavel. Dismantle it, or we will have it professionally removed and bill you for the service. I looked around the room. A few neighbors avoided my gaze. Others nodded along with Chad. The silence was deafening. That's when I knew I was on my own. So I dismantled Lily's levee. She was heartbroken. I was furious, but a calm, cold fury. I wasn't going to yell. I was going to be smarter than them. I started documenting everything. Every letter, every email. I recorded phone calls in a one-party consent state. Baby. I took time-stamped photos of my yard from every angle. I even filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the city for the original land surveys and drainage plans for Serenity Estates. And then, I did what Chad probably never thought anyone would do. I read the HOA bylaws. All 187 pages of them. It was drier than toast, but I read every single word, and I hit pay dirt. First, I found that the drone surveillance was a violation of the right to quiet enjoyment clause. It was arguably an invasion of privacy. Second, and this was the jackpot, I discovered that Chadwick Pembroke, our illustrious president, had built a massive, 2-story, fully enclosed gazebo in his backyard. According to the bylaws, any permanent structure over 120 square feet requires a permit from the city and unanimous approval from the entire HOA board. This thing was easily 300 square feet. It had electricity, a mini fridge, and what looked like a karaoke system. I knew this because, well, let's just say I became very familiar with the sightlines from public property behind his lot. He had broken a major rule, a rule he was supposed to enforce. The hypocrisy was so beautiful it almost brought a tear to my eye. Armed with my knowledge, I went on the offensive. I didn't dismantle my dam. I improved it. I got a book on basic hydrology. I used better rocks, packed it with gravel and sand. I made it structurally sound. It was still small, but it was now a legitimate, minor erosion control measure. The fines started rolling in. $250. Then $500 for non-compliance. Then a threat of a lien on my house for unpaid fees. I ignored them. Well, I didn't ignore them. I responded with my own letters. Subject: Formal inquiry regarding Bylaw 12.4, Permanent Structures. Dear HOA Board, I am writing to inquire about the permitting process for the large, enclosed structure at Chad's address. As a concerned homeowner, I want to ensure all structures are up to code, as per Bylaw 12.4. Sincerely, a very concerned neighbor. The next letter I got wasn't a fine. It was a summons to a compliance hearing. They were going to try and crucify me in front of the whole board. It was time for the public showdown. The clubhouse was packed. Word had gotten out. The air was thick with tension and the smell of cheap air freshener. Chad started, his voice dripping with condescension. We're here today to discuss the egregious and repeated violations by the homeowner at 1428 Elm Drive. Despite numerous warnings, he has not only refused to remove his illegal dam, but has, in fact, enlarged it. He clicked a button, and a drone photo of my backyard, complete with a big red circle around the dam, appeared on a screen. It looked like a military briefing. Therefore, Chad concluded, the board moves to not only place a lien on the property for the unpaid fines, but to hire a contractor to demolish the structure at the homeowner's expense. All in favor. A few hands went up, but not as many as he'd hoped. Before you do that, I said, standing up calmly. I had a folder in my hand. I have a few questions about compliance, starting with Bylaw 7.3, which prohibits surveillance that infringes on a homeowner's privacy. I have here a log of 14 separate drone flights over my property. I've also consulted a lawyer who believes this is an actionable invasion of privacy. The room went silent. Chad's face tightened. But more importantly, I continued, my voice getting louder, I'd like to talk about Bylaw 12.4, the one about permanent structures requiring unanimous board approval. I pulled out a blown-up photo of Chad's mega gazebo. A gasp went through the room. Can you please tell us, Chad, when the board unanimously approved this? And can you produce the city building permit for it? Chaos. Absolute beautiful chaos. Chad turned bright red. That's a pre-existing structure. It wasn't there on the Google Earth satellite image from 2 years ago, I said sweetly. I checked. People started yelling. Is that true, Chad? You fined me for my shed being 2 inches too tall. You made me repaint my door because it was eggplant and not aubergine. The meeting devolved into a chorus of long-suppressed grievances. I had lit the fuse, and the whole neighborhood was ready to explode. In the end, Chad was forced to resign in disgrace. The lien against my house was voided. The new, temporary board, shell-shocked by the rebellion, voted to dismiss all my fines. But they still had one last fatal move to make. They sent a crew to my house to settle the matter and demolish the dam. I was at work. They bulldozed Lily's levee, and with it the delicate natural drainage system I had, ironically, been maintaining. I came home to a pile of rubble in my creek and a final, smug letter stating the violation had been remediated. I just shook my head. They had no idea what they had just done. We got our first big spring storm about a month later. A real gully washer. The creek, which normally would have been gently slowed and diverted by my little dam, now had nothing to check its flow. All that water, with all its energy, shot straight down the creek bed, which runs directly behind the houses on the other side of the cul-de-sac, including Chad's. The force of the water eroded the bank. It undermined the soil. Chad's prized koi pond? Washed away. His perfect sod? A mudslide. The foundation of his mega gazebo? Compromised. The thing now lists at a 15-degree angle. But it didn't stop there. The water, now carrying tons of silt and debris, clogged the main neighborhood drainage culvert. The streets flooded. The pressure from the water underground caused sinkholes. One opened up right in the middle of the street, swallowing a children at play sign. The community pool cracked and drained, filling with mud. The entire neighborhood sank. Not into the earth, but into a quagmire of their own making. The roads are a cracked, sunken mess. Insurance companies are pointing fingers at the HOA's unauthorized landscaping demolition. Lawyers are having a field day. The final, beautiful irony? The city engineers came to assess the damage. Their report, which I happily obtained, stated that the original small rock dam at 1428 Elm Drive had served as a beneficial check dam, slowing water flow and reducing erosion downstream. They recommended it be rebuilt. I have a copy of that report framed in my living room. The new HOA board, comprised of my formerly silent neighbors, has formally apologized. They've repealed a bunch of the most ridiculous rules. Barnaby the gnome now stands proudly on my front porch, wearing a tiny "I told you so" t-shirt that my wife made for him. So, that's the story of how my HOA, in their quest for absolute control, picked a fight with a gnome and a pile of rocks, and ended up washing away their own perfect little world. The moral of the story? Don't mess with a calm man with a printer, a lot of free time, and a basic understanding of hydrology. And maybe, just maybe, let people have their garden gnomes. Outro music fades in. Thanks for watching. Stay petty, my friends. But only when it's justified. End screen. Subscribe button. Links to other videos titled, "I beat my HOA at their own game, and neighbor stole my package, so I mailed him 10,000 glitter bombs."